Booster Set 3, Demonic Lord Invasion, is widely considered an awkward set in Cardfight Vanguard's history. Even though the booster set is labeled as 3, it is actually the 4th set released in the English format. Like I mentioned in my last video, it is due to Bushiroad altering the product release schedule, which released Set 6 as the 3rd set instead. Because the English schedule was changed, there was about a year of difference between the Japanese release and the English release of Set 3. Then, Set 6 was released a full 7 months after Set 3 in the Japanese format. By now, you might be thinking, well, Set 3 sounds so old, outdated, underpowered by the time it was released in English. Who would even buy this? However, what made this set important was that it gave us one of the big 3, which were the 3 powerful decks that dominated the Japanese format during this gap of time. Curious to see if this set lives up to all the hype and want to know more? Stick around and I'll fill you in. This set made its English debut on August 11, 2012, featuring a total of 82 unique cards. This set also continued a similar pattern from the past set, where Bushiroad included cards to the English version previously released as promos in Japan. For this set, it was just 2 cards, Circle Magus for Oracle Think Tank, and Bloody Calf for Dark Irregulars. Overall, the set supported a whopping 8 clans: Royal Paladin, Oracle Think Tank, Kagero, Nova Grappler, Tachikaze, Dark Irregulars, and 2 brand new clans making their debut, Pale Moon and Dimension Police. Dimension Police was a clan that was more Vanguard focused than Rearguard focused, as its game plan was to power up the Vanguard as much as possible. We don't get to see too much of that just yet, as they only received a total of 4 cards this set. Kagero and Nova Grappler fell in the same boat, only receiving 4 cards each. Royal Paladin and Oracle Think Tank, on the other hand, fared better, as they received 10 and 11 cards respectively. The main stars for this set were Dark Irregulars, who received 19 cards and its first wave of support since its debut back in Set 1, and Pale Moon, who received 18 cards. Pale Moon even debuted with a set of triggers as well, making it actually playable on its debut. This set was also good for Tachikaze, as the clan finally started to resemble, well, a legitimate clan, as it received 12 cards, which included a PG and 1 of each trigger unit for the clan. Demonic Lord Invasion is a pretty important set for me personally, as it debuted my favorite clan, as well as my all-time favorite card. For most, it's remembered as this awkward set that felt like they should have got it sooner. But many also remember this set as the one that elevated Oracle Think Tank to the moon, as the goddess of the full moon Tsukiyumi debuted here. Bushiroad even gave a nod to this unit by giving out a free limited edition Oracle Think Tank plastic deck case with the purchase of 2 boxes of Demonic Lord Invasion. August was a pretty pivotal month in Vanguard's history. On August 1st, we finally saw the Barco restriction we've discussed in previous videos finally be implemented. Players could no longer use Barco as their starting Vanguard, though they could still include it in their main deck. We also had the second ever promo pack for English releasing in July, not August, but I forgot to mention it before, so we'll touch on it here. As a refresher, promo packs were packs that contained 1 card out of a possible 3 that you would typically get from playing in shop tournaments. This pack specifically included Holy Disaster Dragon from Royal Paladin, a grade 3 that allowed you to discard a card from your hand to gain an additional 5k power. Sword Emperor, Dragonic Valblade from Kagero, a grade 3 that gained 5k power if your drive check revealed a grade 3 Kagero unit. And finally, Knowledge Drunkard from Dark Irregulars, a grade 2 that allowed you to put a card from your hand into Soul to draw one card if its attack hit a Vanguard. One of the biggest things to occur in May instead of August was the creation of the North American branch of Bushiroad USA. Bushiroad is a Japanese company, but created Bushiroad USA to help it with its growing interest and demand for products overseas. Bushiroad was very active during this period of time, appearing in many conventions and hosting events and workshops. Heck, you could even see Cardfight Vanguard banners at American Major League Baseball games. We'll discuss these events in future videos, but for now, let's break down the cards released in Demonic Lord Invasion. Of all the clans supported in Demonic Lord Invasion, 3 of them only received a total of 4 cards. We'll go over these first. Kagero's 4 cards in this set included a new critical trigger, Blu-ray Draco Kid, giving the clan access to a total of 3 different critical triggers. Since you can only play up to 16 triggers in your deck, with a maximum of 4 of them being heal triggers and only 4 copies of each card total, this new critical trigger meant you could play 12 critical triggers and 4 heals if you wanted. Very different from today, where the standard format is limited to 8 critical triggers. They also received the grade 1 Dragon Dancer Ludris, who gained 3k power if your opponent had 2 or less rearguards, a type of requirement that we still see on cards today. There was also the grade 2 Flame Edge Dragon, who could show charge 1 if its attack hit a Vanguard. The most notable card, however, was the double rare Dual Axe Arch Dragon, a grade 3 that gained 3k power if your opponent had 2 or less rearguards. Dual Axe was popular in Kagero decks as a rearguard that could hit the magic number of 13k attack without a booster. This will become very important when fighting against Cross Rides, a simple ability that we'll talk about soon. If you remember from the previous video, the runner-up of the 2012 World Championship qualifier in France used 2 Dual Axe and 4 of the Blu-ray Draco Kid in their list. I also have this list here, which was submitted to me by a player that was playing at this time. You can actually see all 4 of the cards we just discussed in this list. With that said, this set mainly provided Kagero with a new critical trigger and the Dual Axe to use against Cross Rides, but did not really change how the deck was built or played since the last time we covered it. Nova Grappler's 4 cards included Cannonball, the clan's 5th stand trigger. This meant that Nova Grappler players could play 16 stands as their entire trigger lineup if they wanted to, and still have an extra left over. However, they didn't need to max out their stand triggers because this set gave them the Deaf Army cards. Deaf Army Lady and Deaf Army Guy are a pair of grade 2 and grade 1 respectively that could restand when your Vanguard's drive check revealed a grade 3 Nova Grappler unit. Because the card didn't specify a grade for your Vanguard, this effect could be activated as early as turn 1, and could be combined with the last card they received in this set, the grade 3 RRR, Ultimate Lifeform Cosmolord. Cosmolord could rest 1 of your Nova Grappler rearguards in order to give itself 3k power. You could use this effect as much as you wanted, as long as you still had standing Nova Grappler rearguards to rest, leading to a massive Vanguard swing. Then, you'd be able to restand those rearguards from your Vanguard, potentially checking a stand trigger or checking a grade 3 Nova Grappler for your Deaf Army card's restand skills. That said, at the time the more well-used main Vanguard for Nova Grappler was the Beast Deity Assured Dragon from the earlier set, Breaker of Limits. Players added the Deaf Army cards in their Beast Deity decks as with their skills and Azure Dragon's skill, you could result in almost all of your rear guards restanding. You can see this in action in the list that won the 2012 Malaysian qualifiers here, where the Deaf Army cards were played at almost max copies. The Deaf Army cards provided much needed utility for the deck, as it could threaten the opponent with rear guards that could all stand in a single turn thanks to the combination of stand triggers, the effect of Deaf Army cards, and the effect of your Azure Dragon, an effect that was not tied to Limit Break. Dimension Police debuted in this set with only 4 cards. Similar to Bermuda Triangle and Great Nature before, it was barely a debut. The clan received a vanilla grade 0 starter that had no effect, a 8k grade 1 vanilla, and an 8k grade 2 that gave 2k to the Vanguard when it attacked. It also got the most popular and famous Dimension Police card in
広い世界が俺を呼ぶ正義の心が炎と燃えるライド超次元ロボ大勇者
Dayusha was a grade 3 with 10k power with a single effect. If Dayusha had 14k power or more at the beginning of your attack phase, it would gain an extra critical until the end of that battle. Because this effect activates at the beginning of your attack phase, it did not factor the boost mechanic into Dayusha's power. So you would need to use effects from cards like the Mass Police Grandeur in order to have enough power. Dimension Police will become more fleshed out later on, but for now, this is all they had available. Unlike Dimension Police, Tachikaze finally got a bit more fleshed out this set. Prior to this set, Tachikaze only had a total of 8 cards, 4 from set 1, and 4 from set 2, and nothing from set 6 or our first extra booster, Cavalry of Black Steel. This set gave Tachikaze a total of 12 cards, including access to each type of trigger for the clan and their own PG. The clan also started to form a clearer identity with the introduction of the new Grade 3 triple rare Ravenous Dragon Gigarex. Gigarex was one of the not so sought after triple rares in this set, sadly. Gigarex gained 1k power whenever a Tachikaze rearguard was retired or put into drop. So a game plan started to center around retiring your own rearguards for benefits. We've seen hints of this in the first grade 3 for the clan in set 1, Tyrant Defrex, which would retire one of its own rearguards on attack to gain power. We saw similar concepts in Great Nature and Shadow Paladin, but all 3 clans would go different ways with how they retire their own rearguards and have varying levels of success. For Tachikaze, the retire effect was often referred to colloquially as Eat, due to the cards being dinosaurs. The Grade 2 and Grade 1 Savage Destroyer and Savage Warrior had the same effect as Gigarex, and you had a couple of options that would activate their effects after being retired or eaten from previous sets. There was also the Raging Dragon Blastoise from this set, which could call another copy of itself from the deck after being retired. So you could get an additional attack that turn. This is the same effect that Raging Dragon Sparksaurus had as well, with the same cost to discard 1 card from your hand. However, the trade-off was that these cards had less attack than usual, with the Grade 3 being 9k and the Grade 1 being 5k. While this wave was appreciated, it didn't really help the clan out enough. With the altered release schedule, these cards were underpowered by the time they reached the English format. Due to this, there were no tournament results from Tachikaze in the Championship Series. I can confirm, however, that there were players that brought the deck to compete, at least, thanks to data provided by Bushiroad. While I don't have a topping list, I was able to get a list provided to me by someone that was playing at this time. You can see this list here. The main game plan here was to use Death Rex to eat your rearguards for power and use their effects to replenish the board or your hand. After this set, Tachikaze would not get supported until set 8, where it would get a whopping 20 cards. Next, we'll go over the clans that were supported pretty well in this set, but also, without further delay, we can finally start discussing one of the big three. Due to the altered release schedule that they themselves were rumored to have caused, we won't get the other two of the big three until early 2013. We get the first one of these now, however, the goddess of full moon, Tsukiyumi, who was included in the 11 cards OTT got in this set. These cards also included the Tsukiyumi Ride Chain, which were the set's most sought after chase cards. We discussed ride chains before, but they actually debuted in this set. As a quick refresher, ride chain is an unofficial name given to sets of cards from grade 0 to grade 3 designed to work together, allowing players to search for and ride the next card in the chain while often boosting the Vanguard's power if the previous chain cards are in the soul. However, Tsukiyumi had a very unique ride chain. The grade 0 Godhog Ichibiyoshi lets you look at the top 5 cards of your deck during the beginning of the ride phase to search for the grade 1 Goddess of the Crescent Moon Tsukiyumi. If you find her, you can ride her. The grade 1 and grade 2 had the same effect as well, which meant you could just ride cards from your deck and not from your hand. The remaining cards would then be placed on the bottom of your deck in any order. Even though it may seem minor, if you never shuffled your deck, by grade 3, you would know the order of the bottom 12 to 15 cards of your deck. The grade 2 of the ride chain, Goddess of the Half Moon Tsukiyumi, also allowed you to soul charge 2 when ridden, bringing you closer to this bottom layer of cards, which was called a stack, since you could stack a bunch of triggers at the bottom of the deck to tap into later in the game. Finally, the last card in the ride chain, and one of the big three, was Goddess of the Full Moon, Tsukiyumi. She was an 11k base Vanguard and would actually lose 2k power if you did not have the grade 0, grade 1, and grade 2 of the ride chain in your soul. She also only had one other effect, where if your soul had 6 or more cards of her clan, you could counterblast 2 to draw 2 cards and put 1 card from your hand into soul. I wonder if you find this effect kinda underwhelming? Especially after I've hyped up this big 3 for so long. Well, Tsukiyumi's true strength came from the sum of its parts, as well as the strength of the actual player wielding the deck. Throughout the course of a game, by the time you reach grade 3, how many cards do you think you have left in deck on average? Let's take a look. Your deck consists of 50 cards, always. You use 1 card as your starting Vanguard. You then draw 5 cards from the start of the game. You draw a card each turn, and if you went first, you did at least 1 drive check by your grade 3 turn, and possibly took 2 damage by the time you got there. You also soul charge 2 from the ride chain. You typically play at least 1 card at this point to get 6 soul for the skill of your grade 3 Tsukiyumi, which you could then use to remove 2 more cards from the top of your deck. At the end of all of this, you would typically have 33-ish cards left in your deck. Since you put a minimum of 12 cards on the bottom of your deck in the order of your choosing, a Tsukiyumi player could know what and the order of the bottom 36%, or roughly 1/3 of their deck, and likely know the contents of the rest of the cards above that as well. In addition, they could have stacked many triggers together, with each a chance they had to arrange those 5 cards from the Ride Chain skill. Maybe the first time there were 3 triggers. Let's put those closer to the bottom in order. Then the next time we use the skill, maybe we'll see 4 triggers. Let's put those closer to the top in order. Then, for the last 5, we only see a measly 2 triggers. Let's put those closer to the top as well. With this stack of 12 cards now has 9 triggers in it, and could be checked back to back to back to back as they were stacked together. Knowing the order of cards in any card game is extremely powerful. Casinos kick out players who are known to have a skill like this, commonly known as card counting, as it gives them a huge advantage. Naturally, this is powerful in Vanguard, as you have drive checks and triggers as mechanics. To add to this, Oracle Think Tank had access to Silent Tom as their win condition, whose effect allowed its attack to be unguardable by grade 0 cards. OTT players could now combine this with all those triggers they had stacked. They could also use their previous main Vanguard in CEO Amaterasu to either help get them close to their stack with her divination skill, or use all that soul generated by Tsukiyumi for her Mega Blast, which of course would also help you reach your stack. All of this relied on the player's ability to not only remember the stack of cards and their order, but also to play in a way that gives them access to this at the right time. Tsukiyumi players would need to adapt to this on the fly. They couldn't write any notes because note-taking was strictly prohibited in Vanguard per the comprehensive rules, and it still is to this very day. During this time, you weren't even allowed to use dice or any other accessories at all to keep track of a unit's power, something we take for granted today, especially with the company now selling multiple accessories for this. So, players had to keep all this information in their mind. The Tsukiyumi deck also didn't use any of the new cards from this set aside from the Ride Chain, even though they were designed to support the deck. The list from this time looked more like the winning list from the 2012 World Championship qualifiers in Nagoya, Japan from the champion Hiroshi Kozakai. The only card from this set outside the Ride Chain you'll see is the Grade 2 Oracle Guardian Red Eye, who could so charge 1 on hit, giving you the 6 soul you needed for the Grade 3 Tsukiyumi skill. The rest of the list is composed of cards from Set 1, Psychic Bird, and Silent Tom from Set 2, and the Circle Magus promo that was added into the English version of Demonic Lord Invasion. Some lists even ran the Dragon Monk Gojo from Kagero. While the deck was pretty xenophobic, demanding OTT cards specifically, Gojo could be used for its effect to draw cards and accelerate access to the stack. Let's wrap up OTT by going over some of the other cards from this set. OTT received a Grade 1, Grade 2, and Grade 3, which all had the same effect that said when this unit attacked or boosted in case of the Grade 1, and you had 6 or more OTT cards in your soul, you could draw 1 card and put 1 card from your hand on the bottom of your deck. This could be used to cut through the top layer of cards and reach your stack faster. And this effect was 1 card short of being active when you robed the Grade 3 Tsukiyumi. These effects could also add triggers from your hand back to the deck, which could then become part of the stack. However, these 3 cards would actually not see play in Tsukiyumi decks in the TCG at this time. These cards did, however, become used in the Tsukiyumi deck for Vanguard 0, a mobile iteration of Cardfight Vanguard. Since the game functioned differently here, where your drive checks would actually go to the bottom of your deck instead of your hand. This allowed your stack to be reachable quicker, and these cards allow you to create a denser stack of triggers. The deck actually saw competitive viability for a long period of time in Vanguard 0. Royal Paladin received a total of 10 cards, including their own ride chain. This chain came in handy this set since they just lost the ability to play Barkle as their starting Vanguard. With Barkle restricted, Royal Paladin players had to play the vanilla starter from the trial deck for a few weeks until Dragnail from this set became available along with its ride chain. The Royal Paladin ride chain worked very similar to the OTT one. At the beginning of your ride phase, you can look at the top 5 cards of your deck to find the next card in the chain and superior ride it, placing the remaining cards at the bottom of your deck in any order. The grade 2 also soul charge when you rolled the grade 3 over it. While it was pretty much the same skill as the OTT ride chain, you couldn't fully replicate their strategy as OTT had more cards for accessing the stack. Instead, Royal Paladin used the ride chain to supplement their loss of their starting Vanguard, and to generate soul for the skill of their Soul Saver Dragon. There was also the advantage of not always needing to ride from hand. The grade 3 of the ride chain allowed you to counterblast 2 to gain 3k power, and an additional critical to the end of the turn. This was seldom used, however, and some lists did not even include this card in their deck. Such was the case in this list from the runner-up of the Philippine World Championship qualifiers in 2012, Emil Christopher Tan. This list uses the same game plan as before, but with the ride chain to ride for free and gain extra soul. They also made use of the new grade 3 triple rare from this set, Swordsman of Explosive Flames Palmedes. Similar to the Kagero card we discussed before, this card could gain power and hit the 13k threshold without a booster if you had 2 or more grade 3 units, including itself. This ability made it one of the chase cards in this set for many. There's also a grade 2 version of this card included in this set as well, but only went up to 11k. There was also a grade 2 and grade 1 in this set that supported the ride chain, able to get power if you had 6 or more Royal Paladins in your soul. The last card we'll go over is Toy Poogle. This little fella could gain 3k power if you had 2 or more grade 3 Royal Paladin units. This of course created powerful columns with the Palmedes of 22k easily, and could hit 32k after the column got buffed by Soul Saver Dragon. Thanks to the nature of ride chain cards, some players even built their deck with extra grade 0s. Normally, including grade 0s in your deck would reduce the number of ride targets and hurt your deck's ride consistency. But thanks to the effect of the ride chain, you could have the best of both worlds. You could ride with the skill of the ride chain and use the extra grade 0s for shield value, since they had the same shield value as triggers. Some players went a more offensive route and filled their decks with grade 1s so that they could rush the opponent as early and as quickly as possible. A column of 2 grade 1s equated to 14k, which often was just about as hard to guard as a grade 3 Vanguard because of the shield value available at the time. Royal Paladin was in a solid spot competitively, especially with this wave of support. However, this wasn't enough to elevate the deck. Despite being the 4th most popular clan in the 2012 Championship Series, there was only a single top in the whole series, which came from the Philippine qualifier I mentioned earlier. This was most likely due to the loss of Barkle as the starting Vanguard, not receiving support in the next set, Set 7, or getting any substantial support in Set 4, which was the last set that came out during these qualifiers. Next, we'll go over one of the biggest winners from this set, Dark Irregulars, who, much like Tachikaze, only received 4 cards in Set 1. That was all they had until now, but we get the whole shebang in this set for a total of 19. We've got triggers, 2 stands, 1 crit, and 1 heal, no draws for some reason, APG, a grade 0 starting Vanguard, 8k and 10k grade 1 and grade 2 vanillas, and one of the most infamous Mega Blast units in the game, Steel Vampire. With these cards, you finally got to see more of Dark Irregulars' identity. They were aesthetically themed around occult and macabre, and their game plan focused on having high number of cards in Soul, and controlling the field by retiring the opponent's units. We can see this best exemplified by one of the faces of the clan in its more iconic units, the Grade 3 Triple Rare Demon World Marquis, Amon, who was released this set. Amon had two effects. The first would have it gain 1k power for each Dark Irregulars card in your soul. The second would force your opponent to retire one of their own units after paying the cost of Counterblast 1 and putting a Dark Irregulars unit from field into soul. This retire effect was not once per turn, by the way. Dark Irregulars, often abbreviated to DI, receive two other cards that can retire units. They both require Counterblast 2 when placed to retire one of your opponent's units. The Grade 2, Win the Ripper, managed to get an SP version included in the set and was actually on the cover, confusingly placed next to Aichi Sendo, the main protagonist of the anime, but he never played the card? The theory by some is that Bushiroad didn't want to put the character that used Dark Irregulars on the cover, as they were not revealed in the anime yet. The Grade 1 that could retire was Bloody Calf, and was actually the second of cards originally released as promos in Japan, but were included in the English release of this set. The remaining cards for DI had effects that increase in power according to the number of cards in Soul, or when cards went into Soul. There was also a Brutal Jack clone, as well as a Ganzelot clone, and some cards to Soul Charge to fill up your Soul. And there's the Mega Blast unit, Steel Vampire. Vampire has one of the most unique and outstanding artworks, drawn by the late great Toyo Ashida, credited for working on character design and animation on Pokemon Lucario and the Mystery of Mew, F-Zero Falcon Densetsu, and Cyborg 009, to name a few. Steel Vampire was a Mega Blast unit, which meant it had a skill at the cost of Counterblast 5 and Soul Blast 8 to use. This skill was a very powerful one and is one of, if not the only one, players remember to this day. After paying the cost of Counterblast 5 and Soul Blast 8, you can choose any card and make that card your opponent's Vanguard until the end of your battle phase. Your opponent could choose a card from their soul to ride as their Vanguard at the end of that turn. But this effect would not only reduce your opponent's Vanguard's power for your battle phase, but it could also hamper their guarding options. At this time, the rules stated that you could not guard with cards from your hand if they were not the same or lower grade than your Vanguard. The rules were eventually changed down the line. This is also the second Mega Blast unit DI received, as they already received Demon Eater in set 1, giving DI the unique distinction of being the first clan to have access to two different Mega Blast units. Impressive Mega Blast effect aside, unfortunately, much like Tachikaze, Dark Irregulars did not really show much competitive use during this time, thanks to the other available options and the altered release schedule. While I do not have a topping list, here's a sample list of what a deck might have looked like around this time. I only included 3 PGs and kept the build as pure as possible, however, this might not have been the case back then. There are apparently very intense debates regarding PGs as a whole, since they were still pretty expensive, and no one could agree if they were good or bad cards to play, or even if the right number to run was 3 or 4. The last clan to go over is one of my all-time favorites. Pale Moon received one less card than Dark Irregulars with a total of 18. Like DI, Pale Moon received a set of triggers, 1 crit, 2 draws, and 1 heal. No stand triggers, a Mega Blast unit, an 8k and 10k vanilla, a PG, and a Grade 0 starter with an effect. Pale Moon was themed around a circus aesthetic and focused on interacting with Soul similar to DI. However, instead of amassing many cards in Soul and gaining power or field control, The soul worked more like a resource where units could be called out from mid-battle. This is best exemplified by the grade 3 triple rare for Pale Moon, Nightmare Doll, Alice. This unit had only one effect. If its attack hit any unit, you could counterblast one and put Alice into soul, in order to call out another unit from your soul. You couldn't call out another copy of Alice, but you could call out a Mirror Demon or a Midnight Bunny, for example, who had the same type of effect. Pale Moon also received cards that could fill up your soul, similar to DI. You could technically mix cards of these clans in one deck if you wanted to, but overall, both these clans would not see much play until they get supported again in Set 7. In this set, Pale Moon actually received 3 cards in SP, the Alice we just mentioned now, and my all-time favorite card in Crimson Beast Tamer, as well as her partner Turquoise Beast Tamer. These cards are considered a pair because they not only work together with their effects, but you can also put these cards together, side by side, and see that their art matches up perfectly, almost as if they were originally one image. Many players call this pair the First Legion Mates, which is a reference to a mechanic we won't learn about for a good long while. However, it revolved around pairs of cards with matching art like this, and putting them side by side. These cards themselves aren't insanely impressive, even when they were released. Turquoise Beast Tamer gained 3k power if you had Crimson Beast Tamer in the soul. This effect was actually shared with Crimson Beast Tamer herself and a grade 3 in the set called Barking Manticore. While this effect was very simple, it was this small combination of cards that helped me to really enjoy Vanguard. Back when I first played with the cards in Vanguard 0, I hadn't really found my groove and wasn't really clicking with Vanguard as a whole, but that all changed once I pulled Crimson Beast Tamer and decided to give Pale Moon a shot. Much like DI, I don't have a topping list using only cards from this initial set, but here's a sample list of what it might have looked like. While you can technically use DI cards in Pale Moon, or PM for short, and vice versa, you were de-incentivized by many of the corresponding deck's stronger effects. Amon and Alice, for example, which required cards from their specific clan in order for them to function. These clans also had a bit of an awkward start given the trigger lineup they received this set. PM received no stand triggers, which it would have loved to have to reuse cards with on-hit effects in battle, like Alice, Mirror Demon, and Hungry Clown. Being stuck playing 8 draws also reduced the shield power, as draws only have 5k shield, compared to the 10k shield of other triggers. In addition, the clan needed to soul charge, and soul charging removed cards from your deck. Being forced to draw could lead to decking out, which instantly loses you the game. DI received no draw triggers, which they might have liked, as the clan had no real way to add cards to hand aside from the draw phase or drive checks. This made Amon's effect somewhat difficult to pull off sometimes, as you would lose a rear guard and have no real way to replace that resource that turn other than your drive checks after Amon attacks. Now that we have gone over all of Set 3, Demonic Lord Invasion, we have gone through the full card pool available for the start of the first ever Cardfight Vanguard World Championship Series. This tournament series starts September 1st, 2012, with qualifiers in Canada and Germany. We'll be going over this tournament in detail in the next 2 videos when we cover the next 2 sets: Rampage of the Beast King and Eclipse of Illusionary Shadows. So today I'd like to give a quick meta breakdown up until Demonic Lord Invasion. We've gone over a total of 18 different clans so far. Unfortunately, as you've also seen so far, not all clans are created or treated equally. At this point in the history of Vanguard, Great Nature, Dimension Police, Bermuda Triangle, and Nubatama, remember them, have not been supported enough to build a full deck around yet. While you can use cards of any clan in any deck at this point, none of these clans have had anything to really offer any of the other decks. The one exception being Nubatama, who would see some of its cards splashed into various decks from time to time. Shadow Paladin only had 2 cards for its clan right now, so it would not see any play. Clans like Mega Colony and Tachikaze were vastly more supported than the previous 5 clans I just mentioned. However, they did not have much competitive viability. Mega Colony's Paralyzed gimmick was too costly to win games, and their only boss monster was not very powerful. Tachikaze acquired some decent cards from set 3, but was outshined by the other popular decks. It is possible that Mega Colony cards were splashed into some players' decks, as we've discussed in previous videos, and we did see some Tachikaze representation in just about every single qualifier, but there were no tops, meaning that there were no players that managed to get either 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th using any of these clans. Of the remaining 11 clans, the strongest of these would end up being Gold Paladin. Gold Paladin was able to have consistent ride-ups and early game aggression with the Spectral Duke ride chain, as well as maintain solid hand advantage and strong late game with access to a restanding Vanguard and extra drive checks. This ability to swarm so freely and restand the Vanguard with drive checks was not available to any of the other clans at this time. The closest was Kagero with Gigantic Overlord, but it was undoubtedly the most played deck as well, to the point where I was told a story of a card shop allegedly outright banning players from playing the deck in their shop tournaments, as it was reducing the desire from their community to actually show up and compete. Speaking of Overlord, its clan Kagero, as well as Narukami, were used to compete with Gold Paladin, as they can use their clan's inherent board control to reduce a Gold's player's advantage. Gold Paladin and OTT were also very strong in this format. Royals were able to use Soul Saver Dragon to swing with huge numbers, as well as their own ride chain for ride consistency, and Pongo to search out their Soul Saver Dragon. They had field control with Blaster Blade and field advantage with Alfred and Akane. Royals also had the ability to play 12 critical triggers for their clan in their deck, meaning every drive check could result in an extra damage. OTT was able to almost check triggers when they wanted to once they gained access to their stack, and were able to maintain hand advantage thanks to the free rides from the ride chain and the clan's overall high draw power. They could also close out games with Silent Tom's guard restriction. These 5 clans here would end up being the most popular in the vast majority of qualifiers, as well as the most successful. If I had to rank them, I'd have to put Gold Paladin on a tier of its own at the top, and put the remaining 4 in a tier right under that. I would also like to include Spike Brothers along with these 4. Spike Brothers didn't have as much to play with as the other decks, but it was one of the most explosive decks out of these, able to have very high power turns using the trio of Reckless Express, High Speed Bracky, and Juggernaut Maximum for power, and Dudley Emperor to attack 5 times in a turn. In a tier below this, we can place Nova Grappler. Nova Grappler is one of the few decks with support that was not revolving around Limit Break, which allowed it to hit full power without having to wait until it was at 4 damage. This could be used to keep many of the decks above it at bay, keeping the opponent at 3 damage to limit their plays until you could close out the game from that position. Grand Blue could also be placed in this tier, as it also didn't need to rely on Limit Break, and could use the clan's several ride skips and ability to play 12 criticals to overwhelm the opponent. For now, we can put the remaining clans of Pale Moon, Dark Irregulars, and Angel Feather in a lower tier, as even though these clans were fleshed out enough to see play, they would not see as many results with this existing card pool. These clans would get support again very soon, however, which will change some of their competitive viability. Looking back, Third sets have always been kind of special to me. This set we're talking about today helped me find my love for Vanguard through Pale Moon. The third set of Overdress was when I made my first ever YouTube video on this channel. And Divine's Set 3 included an upgraded form for Lukier, the Pale Moon deck that I now play in the standard format. But with Set 3 Demonic Lord Invasion behind us, we're ready to take a look at the first ever World Championship Series for the English format. As mentioned before, we'll be going over this in the next two videos, starting with Set 7, Rampage of the Beast King. This set was released in the middle of some qualifiers and continues to confuse players as we got Set 7 after 3. And then that same Set 7 will be followed by Set 4. Why not just swap these two around? Well, we'll go over that next time.